Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Esmeralda Curiega. Later this month, CSUN's Theater Arts Department takes center stage, bringing Stephen Sondheim's musical thriller Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, back to life.
The Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
CSUN students perform a hair-raising rendition of the play about the evil barber who seeks revenge on those who framed him.
What happened then? Well, that's the play, and he wouldn't want us to get.
The 1979 Broadway play won the Tony Award for Best Musical and Oliver Award for Best New Musical. Musical director David Axe helps to build suspense with the ominous music. The bone-chilling sounds will echo late into the evening. The haunting ballad of Sweeney Todd will stay with you long after leaving the theater. The production will keep your attention one chop at a time. Cast and crew members say the performance will not shy away from guts or gore. When you have a scary tale and creepy music, what more do you need?
Quite a few people get their throat slit on stage.
Blood, lots of blood, although it won't be real, but it's bloody. It's bloody.
Slow bleeds, squirts, surprise squirts, blood on shower curtains, on walls. There's blood everywhere.
This is live theater. It's got to be huge. It's got to be over the top. The actor who's getting their throat slit triggers it themselves. So when they feel the blade get pressed up against their neck, they'll release that clip. And so that the thin piece of surgical tube will have little slits in it, so that when they release the clip which is holding all the blood back, it'll spray out of their neck in streams.
That's awesome. That is pretty cool.
I appear to have made a bloody mess.
Prop master and blood specialist Hunter Paris says they will use about 1 to 3 gallons of blood per show. He makes the blood with corn syrup, red dye, and his secret ingredient, dish soap. This makes cleaning the costumes easy. The sharp performances are closely directed by Ken Sawyer, a freelance director at CSUN for 10 years. He says he's known for directing scarier shows.
Tension has to be created, so it's not a light comic musical. It's a show with a lot of dark elements, and you should be having fun being scared. So that's a little challenging.
It's a lot of what Ken is doing with us, and he tells us bring in pictures, do a lot of thinking, do research about insane asylums, and that's what we've been working on to develop our characters. It was kind of like a story I created. I was actually buried alive. Gravediggers came and found me. And then just from being in the space, I ended up scratching out my eye, and then I ended up being half blind, and I kind of hallucinate as I'm throughout the entire show.
On Point's Natalie Palacios has a scoop on all the behind-the-scenes details.
Thank you, Esmeralda. And joining me today, I have actress Karina Sapiro. She plays Mrs. Lovett in the play. Music director and professor here at CSUN, David Axe, and award-winning director, Ken Sawyer. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Absolutely. My first question goes for you, Director Sawyer. Ken.
Thank you.
How did the idea of doing Sweeney Todd come about?
Oh, well, you would have to ask the music department about that, because they just called me to do it.
Oh,
so,
I'll answer that if you want.
Yeah, if you want to answer.
Sweeney Todd is my favorite musical of all time. I think it's the greatest musical ever written. And I've always wanted to do it here. But the main reason why we didn't, people would always ask me, don't you like Sweeney Todd? Why don't you want to do Sweeney Todd? And I always say, I love it. It's my favorite one. That's why I don't want to do it yet. Mainly because we didn't have somebody to play the lead, Sweeney Todd, it's a big, huge part for a bass baritone who's got to have great singing chops and great acting chops and gravitas. And you usually don't find that in basically an undergraduate theater program, somebody who can actually do that. And we did stumble across somebody, and I think you may have met him, was Robert Collins, who was in Ragtime last year. And as soon as I heard him do that, I said, I think it's time to do Sweeney Todd. And so that's how that ended up happening, and everybody was thrilled that we were going to do it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm excited to see it. For you as well, can you tell us who the composer of Sweeney Todd is and a little bit about his work?
Stephen Sondheim is the composer and the librettist, and he's a god in the music theater world. I mean, he's written some great shows. His shows are not the biggest hits on Broadway because they're very complex pieces. They're complex musically, they're complex verbally. I mean, he's probably the greatest wordsmith of our generation in terms of coming up with words and rhymes. It's just the most amazing music, lyrics, and then his music is amazing. He's written things like, what we were just talking about? Company, Into the Woods, Someday in the Park with George. He wrote one called Little Night Music. Passion, which is almost never done, but he really is considered really the greatest music theater composer of our generation. I think it's safe to say that. And what's interesting is he kind of led music theater in a direction, and almost nobody followed him because it's so sophisticated and so complex, and he's such a genius that he's kind of in a world by himself. That Sondheim is Sondheim, and they're like, nobody else writes anything quite like him. And as I said, this is his greatest piece.
Okay. Karina, for you, you're playing a pretty big role in the play. Can you tell us a little bit about your character?
Well, specifically for the version that we're doing, I've definitely looked at Mrs. Lovett as somebody who very much wants what she wants, and whoever gets in her way, oh well. You know, she doesn't mean any harm by it, but you know, if I gotta make you into a pie, I gotta make you into a pie. Sorry, that's how that works.
She's very practical.
She's a very practical lady. She really is, and she's also completely enamored with the lead character of Sweeney Todd. Without giving too much away, I will just say that. But she just is very much also a big presence and Sweeney's sort of foil as a character. He's very dark and very brooding, and she's very much kind of, I see as like the humorous side, and still very dark though. So it's sort of a serio-comic venue that we're taking, and I'm really excited to do it.
Other remakes have kind of done her character differently. Some make her like Sweeney Todd's lover, and some do it more as a partner. Without giving too much away. I know you don't want to, but how are you guys kind of portraying her?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think we're definitely doing a bit of both. We actually had the pleasure of having Calvin, what's his last name? Calvin Remsburg, and he played the Beetle on Broadway. And we had him come in and speak to us, and he was saying something that he always sees several productions of Sweeney Todd done with the two leads very much as compatriots and totally into it together, and just a very friend sort of experience. But I think it's much more deeper than that. I think that that's a level to it, but I definitely want to delve a lot into both sides as far as I want to get into the love interest. I want to get into how her feelings are very complex about Sweeney and about herself and about everything that's happening in her world. But I do want to have the compatriotness in it. I think that they are very much like...
It's both a revenge story and a love story.
Absolutely.
Okay. For you, or for both directors actually, do you allow your students to watch the Tim Burton version or the Broadway version, or do you want them to kind of stare free of it all?
Well, we went into a room and watched some of the DVD extras on the film version because actually they're good.
Really good history.
Yeah, good history and all of that. I've referred to all the different productions, but I've really challenged them to use it as background, but make it your own. Really personalize all of this and bring what you have to it. Because I think that's what makes theater alive, is that if you see people who are passionate, you can't be passionate if you're mimicking Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
Because Johnny Depp put his passion into it. So, yeah. So, but I also believe, like, I just finished reading a Harold Prince, who directed the show on Broadway, chapters about him directing the show, because I think knowing the history of a show and knowing what other people were going for and how whether they succeeded or they didn't succeed, helps in putting your own version up.
Yeah. And this question goes for the both of you. Sweeney Todd isn't your typical kind of feel-good play or happy ending to say, yeah, it's been redone multiple times and it still attracts a big audience. Why do you think people are so connected to the story?
Well, my first answer to that is that if it's done well, it's scary. And I've done a lot of scary plays, and people love to be scared in the theater because it doesn't happen that much. So if you can get so involved that you jump, and I think I said to someone in the interview earlier, bring a date, because what a great way to spend with someone grabbing onto your hand going, oh my God!
Jump into their lap.
So I think that's one thing. It's rare to get scared by something live. You get it in movies, but live on stage, it's rare.
Well, I think that if for no other reason, the piece is a work of genius. And I think everybody recognizes that. That's why Tim Burton wanted to make that movie. That's why Johnny Depp signed on to do that movie, because they realized what a great piece of art this is. But yeah, I think it is. I mean, people go to the theater not to see the ordinary and the mundane, but to see the bizarre and the wicked and the strange and the stuff that they don't see anywhere else in life. And this is definitely bizarre, wicked, and strange. And
we're embracing that.
And we are embracing that. You know, you were saying that you want people to be themselves and make the roles their own. I think in the way that you direct and the kind of concept that you bring to these things, it's almost impossible to not do it in this way for this show. I mean, you couldn't bring another show's interpretation into this Ken Sawyer production. It just would not work. It has to be very specific to this production. So you almost give them no choice but to make it their own, the way you direct, which is great, which is really what a good director should do.
And you seem like you really love the play already. What do you do to prepare yourself for such a big role?
Well, yes, I do. This role has been a huge part as far as through my developmental years, I really clung to this show. I grew up with it, like listening to the music and things like that. And preparing for it, I've done a lot of research about the time period. I've done a lot of research about Stephen Sondheim, about how he came about with doing the show. And I've also just kind of done a lot of soul searching in myself and trying to find out what parts of myself I could transcend into that character and which parts which parts are a little bit not as forward and which ones are a little bit more. So in that sense, I do a lot of preparing, looking at outside sources, and also for myself.
Okay. Director, or Ken, sorry. When it comes to picking a play, what factors go into it?
Yeah. Well, if someone calls me up to do a play, I guess it's two things. It's the play itself, and does it speak to me? And actually, if it's a play that's already been done, because I do a lot of new works in the outside world, is it something that I can? Is it a show that I can bring something new to that hasn't either been done before or explored before? And then where it's being done. I love working at CSUN because I get to work with people like Professor Axe and students who really dive in. And the show is, as you can see by the set, it takes place in an insane asylum, So I'm able to take these 20 people and go, okay, we're doing the show as though inmates are performing the show. You all have to create your own inmates, your own characters, and then on top of that, perform the show. And and they go, okay. And that's great. Just the gung-ho sort of, let's be wild and explore stuff. And I think in colleges, that's exactly what you should be doing. You shouldn't play it safe, but you should be jumping off a cliff because we're not being reviewed. And it would be nice if there was a house full of people and we were sold out. But some places you have to go. You have to think about that. But here, what I like is that you can take real risks and chances and explore with people who are ready to jump in and explore.
And it is very much primarily about the students.
Yeah, and the experience.
Their experience and their learning and their development.
Like Karina, I cast her in Cabaret several years ago, where she was a member of the chorus, and then Ragtime.
Yes.
And I remember telling her during Ragtime, we were auditioning somebody upstairs, and I said, Karina, come up, be a reader for this person auditioning. And I was like, you are turning into a really amazing actress, in the 3 years. And I was like, keep at it. And then she came in and auditioned for this, and it was like... So.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you mentioned that somebody gives you or calls you about an idea for a play, and you mentioned that it's about the students, but who has their input when it comes to actually selecting the play?
Wait, at CSUN or in his world?
Well, at CSUN.
At CSUN, it's a long process. We have to, I'm in the music department, but I'm very much involved in the selection of the musicals. There's a committee in the theater department that's made up of faculty and students, the season selection committee, and they come up with ideas, and students bring ideas to them, and then they have to balance a season. The theater department does 8 productions, and so they'll do like a classic and a modern piece and something, ethnically diverse, and 2 musicals, a small one and a big one. And what we're always balancing is how many female roles are there. The theater department has about 5 times as many women as there are men, and unfortunately, most musicals are man-heavy.
Yeah.
And so there are like 6 male parts and 2 women. And actually, this particular show does not have a lot of female parts, but there are others that do. So we're always looking at that, and we're looking at what we did last year. And we also, if we did a really dark one last year or that used not many women, we better make sure we do one with a lot of women this year. And those are the things that come into play when we're trying to decide what to do. And if we did a classic, book musical last year or something like that, maybe we need to do something a little more contemporary this year. And also, I won't pick a piece that I don't know I have at least one person who is capable of doing the role. I mean, I kind of poke around and I find out, I ask around. Not that I precast the show at all, but I wouldn't pick a show that I didn't know that I had like at least one lead walking around the building somewhere, because I'd be a fool if I just said, well, let's do Sweeney Todd, and then suppose no Sweeney Todd shows up. There we are. We're stuck. The publicity's been going out for 6 months.
Yeah.
What do I do now? So I always make sure that I got at least one. I know at least one person. For Mrs. Lovett, we had like about 4 or 5 people who could really do the role really well.
And then in this case, the crazy director comes in and goes, let's make that male role 2 women.
Yes. Yes.
So we've got 2 women who are switching off in a part that normally is played by a male. So.
And in terms of your casting process, how does that work? How long does it take, and what factors kind of go in?
Well, we have 2 nights of preliminary auditions, and then we have a night of callbacks. And then we sit down and try to hash it out, and then plus
hash it out with the other 2 directors who are casting their shows for the semester.
So sometimes there's a little horse trading that goes on in that room. I'll trade you a Karina for a player to be named later and a Toby. And so sometimes that comes into play because we all audition 3 shows at once. One of which is a musical.
And the cool part about being a guest director and coming in and then having Professor Axe there is Professor Axe knows most of the students and spends day-to-day life with them. And I'm coming in fresh. So I've got I've got a fresh eye and he's got an educated eye. And I think that combination together is good in casting.
Plus the fact that Ken now this is his third year in a row doing, yes, no.
I skipped 1 year.
You skipped 1 year, but he did Cabaret, and then last year he did Ragtime. So he knows a lot of the people already. So there is a certain knowledge and knows how they work, what their work ethic is, which is really important. I mean, we've had people, we've all seen people who were talented, but had a really crummy attitude. And that can be kind of poisonous for a show. So, it helps to sort of know what they're made of. And in fact, the theater department, I don't know if the students know this, the theater department sends out a list of possible people who are called back, and they get the whole faculty to make comments about them. Did you know that?
I did not know.
You didn't know that.
Great.
I rarely read those.
Fantastic.
So, but sometimes it's helpful, So this is, great worker will knock himself out, and he'll go to the mat for you and just do everything that you need him to do. You go, and if it's down between that and somebody else says, yeah, I didn't show up for half my classes and the last semester, you go, okay, now I know which way to go here, So these are things that come into play.
Play can be quite expensive. Where do you get the budget from?
The theater department has gets an allocation from the dean's office, and it's quite small. We have to. It's amazing how we do these really wonderful shows. I mean, I think the shows that the theater department does are really fabulous. And we do it sometimes just on spit and baling wire. I don't know how we pull these things off sometimes.
And that's part of the fun of it is that, it's taking place in an insane asylum. So therefore, instead of having to build a chair that has a ramp that slides down and all that, the chair is going to be a wheelchair because that's what you'd find in an insane asylum at that time. So sometimes you have to be really creative in your concept to go. Last year when we did Ragtime, ships were coming in, but they were all pushed on push carts because we set it in a fireworks factory. So, yeah, you can be really creative with your small budget, and sometimes that leads to more interesting work.
Great solutions, yeah. I mean, but and then the music department does kick in something for paying the musicians who are playing in the pit, and also basically the music department provides me to the theater department. So I'm still a full-time professor. Okay. So this is part of my load to come over to the theater department and do this.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about the music process? Is there going to be an orchestra, full orchestra, or piano? There's going to be an orchestra of 9 players. We're doing a somewhat reduced orchestration that is available from the publisher. You can get either the full orchestration or they have a more reduced one, which is, I'm always interested in the reduced one. It provides a little bit less sonic heft out of the pit, but it is a little more economically viable. So we have a 9-piece orchestra, and they're all students. Okay. Karina, would you be willing to sing a snippet of the play?
Sure. I would actually like to sing for you just the very beginning part of my first song in the show, which is The Worst Pies in London, which she's singing about. Basically, she's working in her pie shop, which is in Destitute, and it's nasty, it's gross, and
lots of bugs.
Yeah, lots of bugs, lots of bugs and horrible, awful things. And Sweeney walks in on her, and she's so excited to have a customer that she grabs him and just tries to get him to have one of her pies. And it goes a little something like this. Wait, what you rush, what you hurry? You gave me such a fright, I thought you was a ghost. Half a minute, can't you sit? Sit you down, sit! All I meant is that I haven't seen a customer for weeks. Did you come in for a pie, sir? Do forgive me if me head's a little vague. Ugh, what was that? But you think we had the plague? From the way the people keep avoiding, no you don't! Heaven knows I try, sir. Ugh. But there's no one comes in even to inhale. Right you are, sir, would you like a drop of ale? Mind you, I can hardly blame them. These are probably the worst pies in London. And that's
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Very good. Thank you. So how much time do you have before the next play?
Oh, before the next play.
You mean
Yeah.
the next rehearsal, or?
No, the next, how much time do you generally get between one play to another?
Well, for me personally, I've kind of only really done one show per semester. That's kind of all that can really be allowed for the time being, just because it's so hectic and there's so many shows that cross over tech weeks and dress rehearsals. It's really kind of impossible.
Okay.
But yeah, I usually just wait till the next semester.
So generally it's one group per show.
Right. I think the shows are like a week or two apart within the department. Like one show closes, and then a week or two later, the next show opens, and then that show closes. A week or two, the next one opens.
Okay.
And part of the scheduling puzzle is dealing with the shop time, because the same people, the same handful of people, have to build the sets for all these shows. So as soon as they finish one, then they immediately, they overlap, so they have to have been already building the next show, because they're already starting to build our show, but there's another one. When is the next?
Electricidad. And
that opens?
Sometime in May,
like
early
there's one
May,
that's
late
opening
April.
right now, and we're just now starting to get set pieces, because they've been busy building the other show.
Which is Servant of Two Masters.
Oh, Servant of Two Masters. That opens like this week or something like that.
This Friday.
Okay.
And so that's one of the issues of scheduling. It's a big puzzle. They have to put all this together.
Right.
For me, I'm off to Sweden in 2 months after.
Yeah.
So you're done after this one.
Directing a show in Sweden. So.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for coming. I wish you the best of luck on the play.
This is the moment I knew. His future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
There's no place like home.
Getting home safely is just a click away, and choosing the right seat for your little one's age and size will take you down the road to safer travels.
How can I ever thank you enough?
Visit safercar.gov/the-right-seat.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money.
You can get a taste of Mrs. Lovett's meat pies March 28th through the 30th and April 2nd through the 6th. General admission tickets for a seat in the barber chair are $20 and $15 for students. We would like to thank you for tuning in to On Point. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter by searching CSUN On Point to see more discussions. You can also catch us on CSUNTVnews.com or watch us here every Sunday at 11:30 in the morning.